Are you getting a divorce and worried about what to do with the house? Are you worried about getting your fair share of equity? Maybe you're worried about where you're going to live or how you're going to make ends meet. You might even be worried about your spouse staying in the house and not paying the mortgage. I'm attorney Adam Diamond with Diamond Divorce Law in McHenry, Illinois. Our team has helped many people deal with the minefield of issues involved with your house and your divorce. I've made this video explaining the basics of how Illinois courts deal with residential homes or the marital home in divorce. By knowing the basics of how the court deals with things, you'll be empowered to make sure you keep your fair share of your equity and make sure your spouse doesn't run away with your house. See what I did there? Anyway, the first thing you want to look at in this analysis is who owns it or how the title of the house is actually held. It's important to figure out who's on the title or the deed of the house, because then you know whether or not you're going to divide up the equity or money left over if you sold it, or you have to buy out your spouse. To figure that out, you have to determine if the house would be considered marital or non-marital property. In an Illinois divorce, you usually keep your non-marital property and you have to divide up your marital property. Generally speaking, marital property is property acquired after you're married, and non-marital property is the property you had or acquired before you got married. Now there's exceptions for things like inheritances, gifts, and things like that. But generally speaking, that's the rule. To put it another way, you keep what you had before you're married, and you got to divide up what you got after you got married. This same concept applies to the home or equity. So if you owned your house before you got married and the title was only in your name, it will probably be considered non-marital property that you don't have to worry about dividing up. If you bought the house after you're married, then it'll probably be considered marital property, and you'll want to worry about dividing up the equity or having to buy out your spouse. It's important to note that if you own the house in your name before the marriage, you don't want to transfer the title or change the ownership of the house before your divorce or during your divorce. What can happen is you can accidentally convert a non-marital asset that you owned before the divorce into a marital asset that you have to divide up. So before you do anything with the title of the house, be sure to consult a local family law attorney to make sure you're not accidentally giving away all your equity. The next thing the court's going to look at is, what is the house actually worth? Now this can get a little tricky. We all know that if you go online and you put in an address, you can find any number of websites that'll tell you what they think your house is worth. The problem is that all of these websites don't use the same formula, and they don't always come up with the same value. To make matters even worse, if you ask 3 different realtors or 3 different appraisers to tell you what your house is worth, you probably will get 3 different answers. The real value of a house is what someone's willing to pay for it. To figure that out, a good first simple step is to just consult a local realtor and have them give you their opinion of price. It's frequently called something like a comparative market analysis, CMA, or a BPO, which stands for broker price opinion. And this is a written estimate of your home's value, but it also shows you the comparable sales and the homework the realtor did to give you that opinion. That's usually a good starting point of what your house is worth. Once you know what it's worth, since you're already talking to a realtor, you can ask them to give you a net sheet or tell you what your closing costs would be, so that you can estimate how much you'd walk away with if you sold your house tomorrow. Now that you know what you're going to walk away with, you can figure out whether or not you want to negotiate with your spouse to buy them out to keep the house, or sell the house and split the equity. Another option, of course, is to horse trade or trade other assets equal to the equity. The good news is, if you come up with a deal with your spouse and present it with the court, the judge or court will usually go along with it. But what happens if you can't come to an agreement with your spouse on what to do with the house or equity? Well, the judge has some different options. They can order you to sell it and divide up the equity. They could order one person to refinance it into their name. They could order one of you to transfer it to the other. What I'm getting at here is there's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice this issue. The next question is, what does the court look at to figure out what to do with the house? The court looks at things like, how much equity are you actually fighting over? Can you afford to actually make the mortgage payments? What's in the best interests of the kids? And do either of you have access to resources to buy the other one out? The court is going to try to find a solution that makes both practical and economic sense. So if you're going to fight to keep your house, the first thing you need to do is put together a budget That way you know whether or not you can afford to make the mortgage payments and maintain the home. The easiest way to deal with the house in the divorce is to sell it before the divorce is over. This way, in your final divorce paperwork, it can just show that the house was sold and the equity was divided up. If you need to sell the house after the divorce is over, there are a few things you want to watch out for. Things like who's supposed to make the mortgage payments and what happens if they don't make the payments. What if someone's not cooperating with showings? Who gets the income tax benefits of the mortgage payments or the sale of the house? What if the house doesn't sell for the price you want? How are you going to deal with price reductions and things like that? This can sound really complicated and confusing or even overwhelming. But most qualified family law attorneys deal with these issues all the time, and we know the right stuff to put in your divorce decree or paperwork to avoid many of these disasters, or at least drag someone back to court if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Parting ways with your spouse is already not easy, and dealing with the house can be complicated and overwhelming. The good news is that help is available. Consulting with a local family law attorney up front can help you figure out what your fair share is and how to create a roadmap of how to get there. This can hopefully avoid your spouse running away with your house. See what I did there? Okay, seriously though, just remember, you're not in this alone, and we're here to help you. If you're interested in working with our team at Diamond Divorce Law, please click on the link below to schedule a time to talk with our next available team member. Thank you.